Yeah. So, um, is it that entrepreneurs in Japan feel like that is the big bank like that you go to if you want a money for your startup? Like, is that the door that everybody's crowded outside? Like in the US, you have some VC firms which have the longest line, because they're known to write the big checks and they're known to be the most aggressive. And I would assume that SoftBank, of all the SoftBank, is a much later stage investor. Is it that most entrepreneurs don't even get to the stage where SoftBank can actually invest in them, like because they give out the big checks, right? And they give them out all over the world, or is it more like they're just like what's going on? Like with SoftBank in Japan, willing to pump money in the most aggressive companies. What's interesting to me is that even entrepreneurs in India, right? They see that, oh, we should, if we get money from SoftBank, then we're all set.
Right. So you bring up a very good point that actually there is a huge gap, as there are in some other economies, between seed and angel funding and Series A and later stage funding. And there's almost an antipathy, a sort of like a reverse bias against, or a bias against Japanese startups once they get over a certain size. So there is a big gap that those companies are struggling with, especially as they enter the growth phase. Quite hard for them to raise funding. So I'm talking about companies around the $10 to $50 million run rate, not run rate, annual income revenue. So I think the main reason there are not so many companies in Asia, let alone in Japan, receiving money from the Vision Fund, sorry, I should say East Asia, is simply that they haven't got big enough, and they just don't, they don't represent the value that somebody like SoftBank would need in order to be able to make that investment. So that's part of it. Another thing is that in Japan, we have a parallel funding system. Actually, we have like 3 funding systems here. So one is VCs, one is banks, and one, as I say, is strategic relationship. So with a bank, if a company is willing to wait 10 years and grow 10, 20% a year, make profits after 3 to 5 years and focus on profit, they can borrow several $1 million by the end of 10 years at 1% interest and not have any equity dilution. So without any equity dilution, why would you need to have a unicorn if you're going to do an IPO and you own 90% of the company? You're still getting the same value, and you don't have the pressures that you do if you were a unicorn. So, those parallel tracks mean that Japanese entrepreneurs have a choice. And the number of companies that want to become unicorns in Japan is fairly small. Less than 100 want to be unicorns. I think there's only one or 2 unicorns in all of Japan. So, the number who want to be versus the number who became, it's out of sync with what's going on in the rest of the world. And again, this really just feeds back to the point that Japanese society is fairly conservative. But conservative doesn't mean that you don't get quality of life and you don't get opportunities and that sort of thing. In fact, just the opposite. Because it's a conservative society, there are all kinds of gaps and opportunities here for entrepreneurs, and especially for foreign entrepreneurs. In fact, one thing that has become very apparent over the last 3 or 4 years is the number of accelerators which are focusing specifically on bringing foreign companies to Japan to tie them up with Japanese partners who are major companies who are looking for that new blood and that innovation. So this is something very new and very exciting to see. And now there are incubators, 500 startups and that sort of thing all over Japan. And I would say within the next 2 or 3 years, every city of over 200,000 people will probably have a startup. So the ecological system finally is starting to move. It's got a lot of foreign involvement. I still see that gap in funding. Maybe some foreign fund will, make big money just focusing on Japan because the Japanese don't want to invest in their own.